and neat of dress, wearing, on account of this neatness, shorter petticoats, when walking, than was the mode of her day, and also through this neatness clinging to the very last to these cleanly, useful, quaint patterns. Her black hood, frilled white cap, short, quilted petticoat, high-heeled shoes, and the shining ebony and brass patterns, and over all the great, full scarlet cloak, all these made her an unusual and striking figure against the Wayland landscape, the snowy fields and great sombre pine trees of Heard's Island, as she trod trimly, in short patterned steps that crackled the kittlebenders in the shadowed roads, or sunk softly in the shallow mud of the sunny lanes on a snow-melting day in late winter. Would I could paint the picture as I see it. These patterns in the old trunk are prettier than most patterns which have been preserved. In general, they are rather shabby things. I have another pair, more commonplace, which chance to exist. They were not saved purposely. They are pictured here. English clogs. There is a most ungallant old riddle, why is a wife like a pattern? The answer reads, because both are clogs. A very courteous bishop was once asked this uncivil query, and he answered without a moment's hesitation, because both elevate the soul. Patterns may be clogs, yet there is a difference. After much consultation of various authorities, and much discussion in the columns of various querying journals, I make this decision and definition. Patterns are thick, wooden soles roughly shaped in the outline of the human foot, in the shoemaker's notion of that member, mounted on a round or oval ring of iron, fixed by 2 or 3 pins to the sole, in such a way that when the pattern is worn the sole of the wearer's foot is about 2 inches above the ground. A heel piece with buckles and straps, strings or buttons and leather loops, and a strap over the toe, retain the pattern in place upon the foot when the wearer trips along. See here. Clogs serve the same purpose, but are simply wooden soles tipped and shod with iron. These also have heel pieces and straps of various materials, from the heavy serviceable leather shown in the clogs here and here to the fine brocade clogs made and worn by 2 brides and pictured here. Dainty brass tips and colored morocco straps made a really refined pair of clogs. Poplar wood was deemed the best wood for patterns and clogs. Sometimes the wooden sole was thin, and was cut at the line under the instep in 2 pieces and hinged. These hinges were held to facilitate walking. Children also wore clogs. See here. Clogs, as worn by English and American folk, did not raise the wearer as high above the mud and mire as did patterns, but I have seen Turkish clogs that were 10 inches high. Chapines were worn by English women to make them look taller. 3 are shown here. Lady Falkland was short and stout, and wore them for years to increase her apparent height, so she states in her memoirs. It is a curious philological study that, while the words clogs and patterns for a time were constantly heard, the third name which has survived till today is the oldest of all, galoshes. Under the many spellings, galoshes, galoshes, galage, galosh, and galosh, it has come down to us from the Middle Ages. It is spelt Galokis in Piers Plowman. In a compotus, or household account of the Countess of Derby in 1388 are entries of battues, boots, souters, slippers, and one pair of galokis, 14d. Clogs, or galokis, were known in the days of the Saxons, when they were termed wife's shoes. A galage was a shoe which has nothing on the feet but a latchet. It was simply a clog. In February 1687, Judge Sewell notes, "Send my mother's shoes and gallows shoes to carry to her." In 1736 Peter Faneuil sent to England 4 gallows shoes for his sister. Another foot covering for slippery, icy walking is named by Judge Sewell. He wrote on the 19th of January, 1717, "Great rain and very slippery, was fain to wear frosts." These frosts were what had been called on horses, frost nails or corks. They were simply spiked soles to help the wearer to walk on ice. A pair may be seen at the Deerfield Memorial Hall. Another pair is of half soles with sharp ridges of iron, set, one the length of the half sole, the other across it. Chapines, 17th century. In the Ashmolean Museum. For a time clogs seem to have been in constant use in America. Frail Morocco slippers and thin prunella and Corlamanco shoes made them necessary, as did also the unpaved streets. Heavy-soled shoes were unknown for women's wear. Women walked but short distances. In the country they always rode. We find even Quaker women warned in 1720 not to wear shoes of light colors bound with differing colors, and heels white or red, with white bands, and fine-colored clogs and strings, and scarlet and purple stockings and petticoats made short to expose them, a rather startling description of footwear. Again, in 1726, in Burlington, New Jersey, friends were asked to be careful to avoid wearing of striped shoes, or red and white-heeled shoes, or clogs, or shoes trimmed with gaudy colors. Bride's clogs of brocade and sole leather. Anne Warder, an English Quaker, was in Philadelphia, 1786 to 1789, and kept an entertaining journal, from which I make this quotation, "Got B. Parker to go out shopping with me. On our way happened of Uncle Head, to whom I complained bitterly of the dirty streets, declaring if I could purchase a pair of pattens, the singularity I would not mind. Uncle soon found me up an apartment, out of which I took a pair and trotted along quite comfortable, crossing some streets with the greatest ease, which the idea of had troubled me. My little companion was so pleased, that she wished some also, and kept them on her feet to learn to walk in them most of the remainder of the day." Fairholt, in his book upon costume, says, "Patterns date their origin to the reign of Anne." Like many other dates and statements given by this author, this is wholly wrong. In Purchas, his pilgrimage, 1613, is this sentence, "Clogs or pattens to keep them out of the dust they may not burden themselves with showing that the name and thing was the same then as today." Clogs of Pennsylvania Dutch. Charles Dubdin has a song entitled, "The Origin of the Pattern." Fair Patty went out in the mud and the mire, and her thin shoes speedily were wet. Then she became hoarse and could not sing, while her lover longed for the sweet sound of her voice. My anvil glowed, my hammer rang, till I had formed from out the fire to bear her feet above the mire, a platform for my blue-eyed Patty. Again was heard each tuneful close, my fair one in the pattern rose, which takes its name from blue-eyed Patty. This fanciful derivation of the word was not an original thought of Dubdin. Gay wrote in his Trivia, 1715, the pattern now supports each frugal dame that from the blue-eyed Patty takes the name. In reality, pattern is derived from the French word patin, which has a varied meaning of the sole of a shoe or a skate. Patterns were noisy, awkward wear. A writer of the day of their universality wrote, those ugly, noisy, ferruginous, ankle-twisting, foot-cutting, clinking things called women's pattens. Notices were set in church porches enjoining the removal of women's pattens, which, of course, should never have been worn into church during service time. Children's clogs. 1730. It may have disappeared today, but 4 years ago, on the door of Walpole St. Peter's, near Wisbeck, England, hung a board which read, "People who enter this church are requested to take off their pattens." A friend in Northamptonshire, England, writes me that pattens are still seen on muddy days in remote English villages in that shire. Men wore pattens in early days. And men did and do wear clogs in English mill towns. There were also horse pattens or horse clogs which horses wore through deep, muddy roads. I have an interesting photograph of a pair found in Northampton. Chapter 14. Bats and Brogues, Boots and Shoes. By my faith, Master Ink Pen, thou hast put thy foot in it. 'Tis a pretty subject and a strange one, and a vast one, but we'll leave it never a soul to stand on. The proverbeth there's naught like leather, but my lady answers save silk, old play. Chapter 14. Bats and Brogues, Boots and Shoes. Any of the first sumptuary laws in New England declared that men of mean estate should not walk abroad in immoderate great boots. It was a natural prohibition where all extravagance in dress was reprehended and restrained. The great boots which had been so vast in the reign of James I seemed to be spreading still wider in the reign of Charles. I have an old discourse on leather dated 1629, which states fully the condition of things. Its various headings read, the general use of leather, the general abuse thereof, the good which may arise from the Reformation, the several statutes made in that behalf by our ancient kings, and lastly a petition to the High Court of Parliament. It is almost informing, for instance, in the trades that might want work were it not for leather are named not only shoemakers, cordwainers, curriers, etc., but many now obsolete. The list reads, bookbinders, budget makers, saddlers, trunk makers, upholsterers, belt makers, case makers, box makers, wool card makers, cabinet makers, shuttle makers, bottle and jack makers, hawk's hood makers, gridlers, scabbard makers, glovers. Unwillingly the author added those upstart trades, coach makers, and harness makers for coach horses. It was really feared, by this sensible gentleman writer, and many others, that if many carriages and coaches were used, shoemakers would suffer because so few shoes would be worn out. From the statutes which are rehearsed we learn that the footwear of the day was boots, shoes, buskins, start-ups, slippers, or pantofles. Stubbs said, "They have cooked shoes nets pantofles, some of black velvet, some of white, some of green, some of yellow, some of Spanish leather, some of English leather stitched with silk and embroidered with gold and silver all over the foot." A very interesting book has been published by the British Cordwainers Guild, giving a succession of fine illustrations of the footwear of different times and nations. Among them are some handsome English slippers, shoes, jack boots, etc. We have also in our museums, historical collections, and private families many fine examples, but the difficulty is in the assigning of correct dates. Family tradition is absolutely wide of the truth, its fabulous dates are often a century away from the proper year. The Copley family picture. Wedding slippers and brocade. 1712 buskins to the knee were worn even by royalty. Queen Elizabeth's still exist. Buskins were in wear when the colonies were settled. Richard Sawyer, of Windsor, Connecticut, had cloth buskins in 1648, and 100 years later runaway servants wore them. One redemptioner is described as running off in sliders and buskins. American buskins were a foot covering consisting of a strong leather sole with cloth uppers and leggings to the knees, which were fastened with lacings. Start-ups were similar, but heavier. In Thin's debate between pride and lowliness, the dress of a countryman is described. It runs thus: a pair of start-ups had he on his feet that last were up to the small of the leg. Homely they are, and easier than meat, and in their soles full many a wooden peg. Thomas Johnson of Wethersfield, Connecticut, died in 1840. He owned one pair of start-ups. Slippers were worn even in the 15th century. In the Parston Letters, in a letter dated the 23rd of February, 1479, is this sentence: "In the WHYCH letter was 8D with the WHYCH I should buy a pair of slippers." Even for those days 8d must have been a small price for slippers. In 1686, Judge Samuel Sewell wrote to a member of the whole family thanking him for the kind loving token, "The East Indian slippers for my wife." Other colonial letters refer to Oriental slippers, and I am sure that Turkish slippers are worn by Lady Temple in her childish portrait, painted in company with her brother. Slip shoes were evidently slippers, the word is used by Sewell, and slap shoes are named by Randall Holm. Pantofles were also slippers, being apparently rather handsomer footwear than ordinary slippers or slip shoes. They are in general specified as embroidered. Evelyn tells of the fine pantofles of the Pope embroidered with jewels on the instep. So great was the use and abuse of leather that a petition was made to Parliament in 1629 to attempt to restrict the making of great boots. One sentence runs, "The wearing of boots is not the abuse, but the generality of wearing and the manner of cutting boots out with huge slovenly unmannerly immoderate tops. What over-lavish spending is there in boots and shoes? To either of which is now added a French proud superfluity of leather. For the general walking in boots it is a pride taken up by the courtier and is descended to the clown. The merchant and mechanic walk in boots. Many of our clergy either in neat boots or shoes and gala shoes. University scholars maintain the fashion likewise. Some citizens out of a scorn not to be Gentile go every day booted. Attorneys, lawyers, clerks, serving men, all sorts of men delight in this wasteful wantonness. Wasteful I may well call it. One pair of boots eats up the leather of 6 reasonable pair of men's shoes. Jack boots. Owned by Lord Fairfax of Virginia. Monstrous boots seem to have been the one frivolity in dress which the Puritans could not give up. In the reign of Charles I boots were superb. The tops were flaring, lined within with lace or embroidered or fringed, thus when turned down they were richly ornamental. Fringes of leather, silk, or cloth edged some boot tops on the outside, the leather itself was carved and gilded. The soldiers and officers of Cromwell's army sometimes gave up laces and fringes, but not the boot tops. The Earl of Essex, his general, had cloth fringes on his boots. See his portrait facing here, also the portrait of Lord Fairfax here. In the court of Charles II and Louis XIV of France the boot tops spread to absurd inconvenience. The toes of these boots were very square, as were the toes of men's and women's shoes. Children's shoes were of similar form. The singular shoes worn by John Quincy and Robert Gibbs are precisely right-angled. It was a sneer at the Puritans that they wore pointed toes. The shoe ties, roses, and buckles varied, but the square toes lingered, though they were singularly inelegant. On the feet of George I, see portrait here, the square-toed shoes are ugly indeed. James I scornfully repelled shoe roses when brought to him for his wear, asking if they wished to make a ruffle-footed dove of him. But soon he wore the largest rosettes in court. Peacham tells that some cost as much as £30 a pair, being then, of course, of rare lace. Joshua Warner. Friar Bacon's brazen head prophecy, set into a ply or rhyme, has these verses: 1604 Then handkerchers were wrought with names and true love knots, and not a wench was taught a false stitch in her spots, when roses in the gardens grew and not in ribong on a shoe. Now sempsters few are taught the true stitch in their spots, and names are seldom wrought within the true love knots, and ribon roses takes such place that garden roses want their grace. Shoes of buff leather, slashed, were the very height of the fashion in the first years of the 17th century. They can be seen on the feet of Will Somers in his portrait. Through the slashes showed bright the scarlet or green stockings of cloth or yarn. Bright-colored shoestrings gave additional gaudiness. Green shoestrings, spangled, gilded shoestrings, shoes of dry neat leather tied with red ribbons, russet boots, white silken shoestrings, all were worn. Red heels appear about 1710. In Hogarth's original paintings they are seen. Women wore them extensively in America. The jack boots of Stuart days seem absolutely imperishable. They are of black, jacked leather like the leather bottles and black jacks from which Englishmen drank their ale. So closely are they alike that I do not wonder a French traveller wrote home that Englishmen drank from their boots. These jack boots were as solid and unpliable as iron, square-toed and clumsy of shape. A pair in perfect preservation which belonged to Lord Fairfax in Virginia is portrayed here. Had all colonial gentlemen worn jack boots, the bootmakers and shoemakers would have been ruined, for a pair would last a lifetime. Shoe and knee buckles. In 1767 we find William Cabell of Virginia paying these prices for his finery. £S.D 1 pair single-channeled boots with straps 1 1 pair strong buckskin breeches 1 2 pairs fashionable chain silver spurs 2 1 pair silver buttons 6 1 fine magazine blue cloth housing laced 12 1 strong double bridle 4 6 pair men's fine silk hose 4 buttons and trimmings for a coat 5 2 New England dandies wore, as did Monsieur A. Lamode, a pair of smart pumps made up of grain D leather, so thin he can't venture to tread on a feather. Buckles were made of pinchbeck, an alloy of 4 parts of copper and 1 part of zinc, invented by Christopher Pinchbeck, a London watchmaker of the 18th century. Buckles were also plaited and double-plaited with gold and silver, which was the general spelling of plated. Plated buckles were cast in pinchbeck, with a pattern on the surface. A silver coating was laid over this. These buckles were set with marcasite, garnet, and paste jewels, sometimes they were of gold with real diamonds. But much imitation jewelry was worn by all people even of great wealth. Perhaps imitation is an incorrect word. The old paste jewels made no assertion of being diamonds. Steel cut in facets and combined with gold, made beautiful buckles. A number of rich shoe and garter buckles, owned in Salem, are shown here. These old buckles were handsome, costly, dignified, they were becoming, they were elegant. Nevertheless, the fashionable world tired of its expensive and appropriate buckles. They suddenly were deemed inconveniently large, and plain shoestrings took their place. This caused great commotion and ruin among the buckle makers, who, with the fatuity of other tradespeople, the wig makers, the hair powder makers, in like calamitous changes of fashion, petitioned the Prince of Wales, in 1791, to do something to revive their vanishing trade. But it was like placing King Canute against the advancing waves of the sea. Wedding slippers. When the revolutionists in France set about altering and simplifying costume, they did away with shoe buckles, and fastened their shoes with plain strings. Minister Roland, one day in 1793, was about to present himself to Louis XVI while he was wearing shoes with strings. The old master of ceremonies, scandalized at having to introduce a person in such a state of undress, looked despairingly at Dumouriez, who was present. Dumouriez replied with an equally hopeless gesture, and the words, "Hélas, oui, monsieur, tout est perdu." President Jefferson, with his hateful French notions, made himself especially obnoxious to conservative American folk by giving up shoe buckles. I read in the New York Evening Post that when he received the noisy bawling band of admirers who brought into the White House the mammoth cheese, one of the most vulgar exhibitions ever seen in this country, he was dressed in his suit of customary black, with shoes that laced tight round the ankle and closed with a neat leathern string. When shoestrings were established and trousers were becoming popular, there seemed to be a time of indecision as to the dress of the legs below the short pantaloons and above the stringed shoes. That point of indefiniteness was filled promptly with top boots. First, black tops appeared, then came tops of fancy leather, of which yellow was the favorite. Gilt tassels swung pleasingly from the colored tops. Silken tassels, homemade, were worn. I have a letter from a young American macaroni to his sweetheart in which he thanks her for her heart-filling boot tassels, which seems to me a very cleverly flattering adjective. He adds, "Did those rosy fingers twist the silken strands, and knot them with thought of the wearer? I wish you was loving enough to tie some threads of your golden hair into the tassels, but I swear I cannot find never a one." The conjunction of two negatives in this manner was common usage 100 years ago, while you was may be found in the writings of our greatest authors of that date. In one attribute, women's footwear never varied in the 2 centuries of this book's recording. It was always thin-soled and of light material, never adequate for much walking abroad or for any wet weather. In fact, women have never worn heavy walking boots until our own day. Whether high-heeled or no-heeled, they were always thin. The curious needle-pointed slippers which are pictured here were the bridal slippers at the wedding of Cornelia de Peyster, who married Oliver Teller in 1712. Several articles of her dress still exist, and the background of the slippers is a breadth of the superb yellow and silver brocade wedding gown worn at the same time. When we have the tiny pages of the few newspapers to turn to, we learn a little of women's shoes. There were advertisements in 1740 of morning shoes, fine silk shoes, flowered russet shoes, white calamanco shoes, black chamois shoes, girls' flowered russet shoes, shoes of black velvet, white damask, red morocco, and red everlasting. Damask worsted shoes in red, blue, green, pink color and white in 1751. There were satine patterns for ladies' shoes embroidered with flowers in the vamp. The heels were high, cross-cut, common, court, and Württemberg. Some shoes were white with russet bands. French fall shoes were worn both by women and men for many years. Mrs. Abigail Bromfield Rogers. Here is a pair of beautiful brocade wedding shoes. The heels are not high. Another pair was made of the silken stuff of the beautiful sack worn by Mrs. Carroll. These have high heels running down to a very small heel base. In the works of Hogarth we may find many examples of women's shoes. In all the old shoes I have seen, made about the time of the American Revolution, the maker's name is within, and this legend, "Rips mended free." Many heels were much higher and smaller than any given in this book. Mrs. Carroll's slippers. It is astonishing to read the advocacy and eulogy given by sensible gentlemen to these extreme heels. Watson, the writer of the Annals of Philadelphia, extolled their virtues, that they threw the weight of the wearer on the ball of the foot and spread it out for a good support. He deplores the flat feet of 1830. In 1790 heels disappeared, sandal shapes were the mode. The quarters were made low, and instead of a buckle was a tiny bow or a pleated ribbon edging. In 1791 the exact size of the shoe of the Duchess of York was published, a fashionable fad which our modern sensation hunters have not beat out themselves of. It was 5 3/4 inches in length, the breadth of sole, 1 3/4 inches. It was a colored print, and shows that the lady's shoe was of green silk spotted with gold stars, and bound with scarlet silk. The sole is thicker at the back, forming a slight uplift which was not strictly a heel. Of course, this was a tiny foot, but we do not know the height of the Duchess. I have seen the remains of a charming pair of court shoes worn in France by a pretty Boston girl. These had been embroidered with paste jewels, diamonds, while to my surprise the back seam of both shoes was outlined with paste emeralds. I find that this was the mode of the court of Marie Antoinette. The Queen and her ladies wore these in real jewels, and in affectation wore no jewels elsewhere. In Mrs. Gaskell's My Lady Ludlow we are told that my lady would not sanction the mode of the beginning of the century which made all the fine ladies take to making shoes. Mrs. Blundell, in one of her novels, sets her heroine, about 1805, at shoemaking. The shoes of that day were very thin of material, very simple of shape, were heelless, and in many cases closely approached a sandal. A pair worn by my great-aunt at that date is shown on this page. American women certainly had tiny feet. This aunt was above the average height, but her shoes are no larger than the number known today as ones, a size about large enough for a girl 10 years old. White kid slippers. 1815. It was not long after English girls were making shoes that Yankee girls were shaping and binding them in New England. I have seen several old letters which gave rules for shaping and directions for sewing party shoes of thin light kid and silk. It is not probable that any heavy materials were ever made up by women at home. Sandals also were worn, and made by girls for their own wear from bits of morocco and kid. In the early years of the century the thin, silk hose and low slippers of the French fashions proved almost unendurable in our northern winters. One wearer of the time writes, "Many a time have I walked Broadway when the pavement sent almost a death chill to my heart." The Indians then furnished an article of dress which must have been grateful indeed, pretty moccasins edged with fur, to be worn over the thin slippers. An old lady recalled with precision that the first boots for women's wear came in fashion in 1828. They were laced at the side. Garters and boots both had fringes at the top. End of the Project Gutenberg ebook 2 Centuries of Costume in America, Volume 1, 1620–1820. Updated editions will replace the previous one, the old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works. By using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg, you agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Trademark Symbol Electronic Works 1.0. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg. 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. 1.e.5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. 1.e.6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg trademark symbol website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. 1.e.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f1.f.1. Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2. Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages, except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the Foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3. Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4 Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3, this work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5 Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6 Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion and distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, and C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg trademark symbol's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg trademark symbol and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The foundation's IN or Federal Tax Identification Number is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, UT 84116. 801-596-1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways including checks, online payments and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the U.S. unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks. 2 Centuries of Costume in America. MDCXX MDCCCXX Alice Morse Earle, author of Sundials and Roses of Yesterday, Old Time Gardens etc. Volume I 1903. Contents Vol I. List of illustrations in Volume I. Chapter I. Apparel of the Puritan and Pilgrim Fathers. Chapter I. Apparel of the Puritan and Pilgrim Fathers. Chapter 2. Dress of the New England Mothers. Chapter 2. Dress of the New England Mothers. Chapter 3. Attire of Virginia dames and their neighbors. Chapter 3. Attire of Virginia dames and their neighbors. Chapter 4. A vain Puritan grandmother. Chapter 4. A vain Puritan grandmother. Chapter V. The evolution of coats and waistcoats. Chapter V. The evolution of coats and waistcoats. Chapter 6. Ruffs and bands. Chapter 6. Ruffs and bands. Chapter 7. Caps and beavers in colonial days. Chapter 7. Caps and beavers in colonial days. Chapter 8. The Venerable Hood. Chapter 8. The Venerable Hood. Chapter 9. Cloaks and their cousins. Chapter 9. Cloaks and their cousins. Chapter X. The Dress of Old-Time Children. Chapter X. The Dress of Old-Time Children. Chapter 11. Perukes and Periwigs. Chapter 11. Perukes and Periwigs. Chapter 12. The Beard. Chapter 12. The Beard. Chapter 13. Patterns, clogs, and galoshes. Chapter 13. Patterns, clogs, and galoshes. Chapter 14. Bats and brogues, boots and shoes. Chapter 14. Bats and brogues, boots and shoes. The full Project Gutenberg license.